When I was in the Army and stationed at Fort Knox, we used to I used to try to go home sometimes just on weekends, which meant that you'd leave on a Saturday afternoon. We had to work on Saturday mornings. And there were no interstates, so you'd go up basically through Kentucky into Ohio on Route 42 and get home maybe at about 9 or 10 at night, maybe later, and go to bed, get up, and go see Lois or Mom, and spend the day with her, and then leave at about 8 or 9 the next morning, and get back at night. And it was a short trip, but we did that a few times when we couldn't get a 3-day pass or just decided to go. So one weekend, there were a couple of us from Cleveland. One guy had a car, so there were 4 of us in the car. Well, instead of going up through Ohio, we decided to go up through Indiana. Thought it might be shorter, and so we left in the afternoon, and we're up in the middle of Indiana about, I don't know why we were so late that weekend. It was about 7 o'clock. And it was getting dark. And the kid that was driving fell asleep, went off the road, and hit a small tree. Nobody was hurt, but the driver said he thought he needed to stay with the car while we waited for the police and the authorities, and his car wasn't operable anyway. So he stayed. We got out on the highway, 2 of us, and started hitchhiking. The first 2 people that picked us up were 2 high school kids who thought it was really funny that we asked them not to go too fast because we were kind of nervous because of our accident. So that was the wrong thing to say, because instead of that, they started driving like hot rodders and scaring us even further. They drove us into Ohio somewhere and let us off. So we start hitchhiking again, and a car came along and picked us. The guy stopped, backed up, and it was a guy in his 20s perhaps, with a great big, there's no other word for it, and there were a couple guys in the back, I don't know. He had a great big fat girlfriend. Sorry to use the word, but she was. And you could get 3 in the front seat, one of those 6-passenger vehicles. And I sat in the back or in the front with her and him. And there were a couple guys in the back with my friend. Well, this rather large lady kept moving over so she could sit closer to me. And the guy who was driving made it very clear that she should sit where she was supposed to. And I kept moving as close to the passenger door as I could, because I didn't want this guy who was about as big as his girlfriend to think that I was trying to make some sort of move on her, who was really not interested. And he also reminded me or told me that he had been in the Navy when he was in the service, and he didn't particularly like Army guys. So here I was squeezed up against the passenger door with this rather large girlfriend who kept edging over toward me, and with this big guy who didn't quite threaten me, but threatened her to sit where she was supposed to. And I thought, I hope he isn't able to take us too far. Well, he took us to Delaware, Ohio, and by this time it was 3 a.m., something like that. So we were exhausted. So we got a hotel room. I called Grandma and Grandpa, my folks, told them the situation, and they said they'd come down and get me in the morning, which they did. But of course the outcome of it was we had just a few hours to spend at home before we had to get back to camp. And our friend with the car never did get back on time, and he got in a little bit of trouble for leaving the base. You weren't supposed to leave the Fort Knox on the weekend unless you had a 3-day pass, not just because you had 3 days or 2.5 where you might get to Cleveland and back. I think that was one of our last trips to Ohio without having at least 3 days. The end.